All right, everybody. Welcome to the Contextual Christian Church Bible Study. Today we'll get into First Kings chapter 20, verses 22 to 34. I'm going to pray it in, and then Matt's going to do the summary. Go ahead and bow your heads. Father, thank you for bringing us into this Taco Tuesday as we're going to get into another Bible study. Where this Bible study is going to be an interesting one, opening up the path of what Elijah needs to do and opening up what Elijah is going to do going forward. But first, we must get through this point with the king of Israel and Syria with these lessons. I pray that these become reminders or something new. And I also pray that the context is easy to understand in our reading. And in Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Now, before I get started
Amen.
talking about the summary, Charles, uh, when we're praying, it's a time of seriousness. It's one thing if you happen to be laughing already about something, but it's not a time for making jokes. Prayers are a serious thing. Don't be making that Taco Tuesday joke or stuff like that.
You got it.
All right. Now then, so from what we read yesterday from verse 7 of chapter 20, and we went from verse 7 to 21. And as we went through, we had where Ahab, the king of Israel, first part that we went through was pretty much where he had told the elders about how he gave in and got punked out and all that. And the elders basically told him, like, bro, what are you doing? Don't do that. Reject it. So he told Ben-Hadad, the king of Syria, that look, everything I said I was going to do before that I had already agreed to at the first part, I'll do that. But nothing beyond that. So he put his foot down. Then Ben-Hadad started making threats. Long story short, saying if I don't take everything that Israel has to the point that they should just be happy to have the dirt on the ground, then let the gods that he follows, let the gods do even worse to me or the same. And so Ahab, after hearing this, and they're going back and forth through messengers in this conversation, tells him, bro, you better check what you're saying because like I'm trying to play nice, but don't think that you're better off than you actually are. Then they got to the point where they actually were going to go into war, and they did. And between, I think it said 32, 200 and let me get there, 232 princes of the provinces of the areas of Israel, basically, and 7,000 of the children of Israel. Now, these were the faithful followers. So, as it was separate from Ahab, because we know that Ahab was an evil king, and especially his queen, Jezebel. But at this moment, we have it where it's going through this. And in this war, they completely demolished the king of Syria and his people. And so after they fled away, Ben-Hadad, he was able to escape on a horse with the horsemen. And that's where we finished out, was when the king of Israel went out and they even destroyed the king of Syria's horses, chariots, and completely killed a whole massive amount of the Syrians. Although Ben-Hadad did get away, that's where we ended in 21. Now then, let me go and switch it over. And go ahead, Charles, when you're ready.
Got it. So let me see. We'll be reading First Kings chapter 20, verses 22 to 26. Switch it over to the app. Give it a couple seconds. Verse 22. And the prophet came to the king of Israel and said unto him, Go, strengthen thyself, and mark and see what thou doest. For at the return of the year, the king of Syria will come up against thee. And the servants of the king of Syria said unto him, Their gods are gods of the hills. Therefore, they were stronger than we. But let us fight against them in the plain, and surely we shall be stronger than they. And do this thing Take the kings away, every man out of his place, and put captains in their rooms, and number thee an army, like the army that thou hast lost, horse for horse, and chariot for chariot. And we will fight against them in the plain, and surely we shall be stronger than they. And he hearkened unto their voice and did so. And it came to pass at the return of the year that Benhadad numbered the Syrians and went up to Aphek to fight against Israel. There's a couple things I gotta reread, because the way they wrote it. Oh man.
It's okay. You got this, bro. Don't get frustrated. Keep in mind, this is all part of growth. You can't keep getting frustrated just because something may be difficult. Look at it more as a
Yeah,
challenge to work through, not as something that's like, oh man, I got to deal with this.
I was about to say I'm not that frustrated. I'm not that frustrated. It
Well,
ain't
it
that.
sounded like it on the phone.
No.
You got this, bro.
So the prophet, we still don't have a name for this prophet that keeps talking to Ahab, who's king of Israel at this point in time. The prophet's telling Ahab, which is king of Israel, he's telling them to go and
Who's
strengthen
most
thyself.
likely
As
the prophet, though?
um, most likely, I'm thinking Elisha,
Yeah.
most likely. Uh,
And why? Why is that most likely the answer? You're right, but why?
why Elisha? He was the last one that the Lord told Elijah to set him up as the prophet that's going to take your place. And that's that after that, it got into a prophet talking to Ahab right after. That and the whole
Exactly. It
Benadad
said that he
situation.
passed his mantle over, and then we've been hearing about this prophet talking to Ahab. And when we heard about the prophet being set up, it was going to take the place of Elijah. So it is, though we don't have the name to be 100% sure, it is most likely Elisha. All right, go ahead with your explanation then.
So for verse 22, with the prophet telling Ahab, when he's talking about go and strengthen thyself, um, because of the whole return to Syria and everything, um, just go back and get your strength back, get some rest, get some food, get your tools, get all the things you need, because they will be coming back. But it brought up in Mark. Now, last time you brought this up in our last reading, this was in the last study. It was like, I pray thee, or I beg of thee, when you brought up the Mark, right? This one might be different, but in the last one, when you had brought up Mark.
Okay, you got to write down because this is something that I specified. It wasn't the mark part, it was the I pray you part. Mark means point out. Think like a marker. You're marking something. You're pointing it out. You're selecting. You're drawing on it. If I'm marking a person, what am I doing, Charles?
Pointing them out.
Now, do we see anywhere in here where it says I pray you?
No, no.
So when I give you guys these explanations, you need to write down what part is which. Because that literally shouldn't have been a question. It just happened yesterday. So if you had it in your notes already, you'd be better prepared for today. If you ever see I pray you, that means I'm begging you. If you ever see marked, like in these contexts where it's not a person, it's talking about point out, single out, figure out who it is. Mark the marking board, mark the bullseye, mark the person. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I just wrote
Charles?
it down. So
Yeah.
can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wrote it down. So with the whole strengthening ourselves, I think he's just emphasizing the whole like strengthen yourself because of the return of the series. Just further emphasizing you need to be prepared for when they come back.
Yeah. Well, no, he's not just saying to strengthen yourself. He's saying, because he said, mark and see what thou doest. So who's the thou? that it's talking about?
What thou doest, that would be, and see what thou doest. What you would do. What
Yeah, but who
thou
is the
doest.
you?
Oh, Ahab.
There you go. Good.
Yeah. So
So mark and see what you do. For at a return of the year, the king Syria will come up against thee. So,
and that
but
was the
he's not just saying strengthen yourself. He's also saying something else. What else is he saying, Charles?
and see what thou doest.
Remember what mark means: to point out, focus on, single out.
Focus. I'll use the focus. Point out or focus what you're doing, what thou doest, or what you've done.
And what is the
Because
point of
that's
saying
past
that then?
tense.
What does he mean by saying that?
That's what I'm thinking about right now. Is
Doest is not past tense. Doest is like saying doing. Present tense.
present tense. Focus on what you're doing. Strengthen yourself. Focus on what you're doing.
Now, what would be the reverse of that if he didn't say to focus on what you're doing and strengthen yourself? What would be the reverse?
A reverse I'm thinking about is what Ben Hadad did. Go get lazy. Don't get drunk. Don't focus on any of
Yeah.
that stuff.
So,
So
in other words, he's telling him to get yourself as strong as you can be and don't let up. Stay focused on the task because he's going to be coming back for another war.
tighten up because he's coming back.
Well, not tighten up. He's already tight. Stay tightened up. Stay ready so you don't have to
Stay
get
ready.
ready.
And then on the next part, for at the return of the year. Now, when I'm going from there and reading it again, before I go to the definition, I'm reading that as end of the year. But when I go to the definition,
It's not specific to the end of the year. It would have
we don't.
said the end. It said the return of the year. So when the year comes back around, well, if you're returning, are you going to a different spot?
No, you're going to the same spot.
So not only is he coming back, what is it also telling him? Not only is Ben Hadad going to come back, what is he pointing out here by saying at the return of the year?
Same time frame, but a different year is what I'm thinking
Yeah,
about. So, like,
exactly.
if he
Next year
came in
around the
March,
same time, you got a
yeah, if he
year to
came,
prepare.
you got yeah. And so next after that, verse 23, the servants of Ben Hadad are telling him, hey, their gods are the gods of the hills. So because of that, they were stronger. But if we fight them and it brought up the plain, which is like flat lands,
Mhm.
if we fight them there, we'll be stronger there. And they start to count their horses, chariots, their people. And Ben Hadad
Wait,
actually
no,
lists
no, reread that. It didn't say that them to count there.
and number thee an army like an army that thou hast lost, the horse for horse,
Yeah,
chariot for
well, no, no,
chariot.
no, you're going too far.
Uh,
And number thee an army like the army thou hast lost. What does that mean?
take count of the army.
No,
Um,
that's not the only other option. Let me give somebody else a chance.
yeah,
Uh, Thomas. Not
Yo,
Tremaine's not on yet. What does number thee an army like the army that thou hast lost mean?
build up an army.
Yes, but not just build up an army.
Hold on, like the army that thou hast lost. So equivalent to the army that
Equivalent
once
in what
was
way?
in strength and numbers.
There you go. Good. You see that, Charles?
can you hear me?
Yes, you saw the
Now I
word
can.
number and you automatically assumed literal, counting number.
Hmm.
This is something you'll have to really work on in the future. And right now, you got to learn to differentiate between literal and a metaphor or an exaggeration. When he said number thee an army, that would be the part where you're counting. That sounds good. That's one possible, but that's not the only possible. If I'm counting, how am I counting that? Keep that how in your mind when it says for them to do something. Anytime someone is given instructions, and this is for everybody, the first question that should be in your mind is how would they be able to do what the question is asked? What are the different possibilities? Because, yeah, he could be saying, count how many you have. Here's the problem with that, though. In the next section, it says, like the army that thou hast lost. Does counting the amount that you have make sense with that second part, Charles?
Number the army.
If I'm just counting my army, if all I'm doing is counting, how does that connect to like the army I lost?
Okay, yeah, no, I see where I got that thought from. I see where I got it from.
You saw number the an army and you just ran with it instead of thinking about how everything connects. Don't forget, if there's a comma and not a period, it's connected somehow. So you need to think about how they could connect without being a contradiction or an impossibility. Because right after you see where it says, like the army thou hast lost, what's the next thing that it says?
Horse for horse, chariot for chariot.
Does that make sense with just counting what you have?
Oh, no, not right now. Not right now. It
Exactly.
doesn't.
So when you take how it all connects in one sentence, see, the point in getting each separate part is to understand what that part means of its own. Then when you look at the next part, that's when you see how do they connect. Yeah, if you were to just say number thee an army, yeah, that could mean count the amount of people you have in your army. Just give me a head count. That could mean that. But then you have a problem as soon as you get to that next part, like the army that thou hast lost. Horse for horse and chariot for chariot. Now that doesn't make sense. What do you mean horse for horse? What do you mean chariot for chariot? If I'm just counting what I have, there is no horse for horse. It's just the horses total. It's just everything total. Horse for horse means horse in place of horse. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
So, yes, you want to understand each individual part. But as soon as you're done understanding the possibilities of that part, you need to look at how they connect to each other. That's where you slipped up here. All right, go ahead and redo that 25 and 26.
So building the army, like the army he had lost. Building the horse for horse, chariot for chariot, getting the horses, getting chariots, and then fighting against the children of Israel in the flatland, which you brought up the
But
plain.
just
So
getting them, there's no like you didn't. What does it mean by like the army thou hast lost? You still haven't explained that part.
I just said build the army like the one you had lost.
That doesn't
You want me to
explain
deep?
it. You're just re-saying it. What does he mean by build the army like thou hast lost?
The only other way I can say build the army is grab the horses and the chariots, grab new horses, new chariots to replace the ones you lost. That's the only
There
way.
you go. That's the part you're missing is replacing. Building an army does not including replacing. Building an army to replace, now you're including the replacing. You see what I'm saying?
I didn't know I had to like specify it that deep.
Well, think about the two different things. They mean two different things, right? If I say build up an army, there's many ways you can build up an army. But if I say build up an army to replace the ones you lost, that's really specific to replacing the ones that are gone. But if I'm just building up an army, there's no limit to how much I'm putting in the army or what I'm putting in the army. Who's to say it
Oh
has
yeah,
to be
yeah.
horses?
Yeah, because it did bring up like thou has lost, because it did bring that up. So yeah, now I get you.
Exactly. So you have to have that replacement. Otherwise, you didn't actually explain it. If you just say, like thou has lost, and then you say, all right, build up an army, but you don't say to replace the ones that you've lost, then you don't have the same context. You see how that's different?
Because it already
All
went
right.
out of its way to bring up the whole that thou has lost too. So
Exactly. So we have a
yeah,
specifying of how much or in what way. This is why I said before, keep in mind when the Bible get, and it's for everybody, keep in mind when the Bible gets specific. If the Bible gets specific, you need to get specific. If the Bible stays generic, you need to stay generic. Pay attention to how it words it. If details are given like that, you need to use the details and re-explain it. Otherwise, just like now, you change the entire context by just telling them to build an army and not saying to replace the ones that have already lost. That's two different contexts. You see what I'm saying?
yeah, I see what you're saying.
All right. Now go ahead and redo that 25 and
So
26.
yeah, to build the army that well, in building this army, you're replacing what you lost. You're replacing the horses that you lost, the chariots that you lost.
Good.
Then after that, we're gonna fight on the flatlands, and they're claiming that they'll be stronger there on the flatlands. And Ben Hadad actually listened to him and actually did what the servants told him to do. And when it brought up and it came to pass at the return of the year, so the same point in time when they fought, just a different year, the next year, then Ben Hadad is building everything. Well, the armies, of course, replacing what he had and going to, did I say it right the first time? A fake. Yeah.
One
And he
problem,
set
you
up a,
said then Ben Hadad was building. It didn't say that he started building at the return of the year.
that Ben Hadad numbered. Oh, no, that he already built it.
Yeah, there you
He
go.
numbered. So he already built it and went to a fake to go against Israel.
Last correction, I would have specified affects a city because that could also be somebody's name with how the names sound in the Bible. You need to specify when a thing is a place or if it's a person when you do your explanations. Because somebody who comes in is just listening, if they've been on Bible study with us, they might understand, but then again, they might not, like here, and went up to Afek to fight against Israel. Well, that could just as easily, the way it sounds, be a person, right, Charles?
Some random person's name.
Yeah. So we went up to Afek so we could fight Israel. Well, that makes it sound like Afek, man, he's a real important person. They went to him first before fighting Israel. So if you don't specify that that's a city, that has a different context. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
All right. Now, second section. Any comments or questions, anything for the first section as I'm changing it? All right. Now then, in verse 27 to 31, and the children of Israel were numbered and were all present and went against them. And the children of Israel pitched them like two flocks of kids. But the Syrians filled the country. And there came a man of God and spake unto the king of Israel and said, Thus saith the Lord, because the Syrians have said, the Lord is God of the hills, but he is not God of the valleys. Therefore will I deliver all this great multitude into thine hand, and ye shall know that I am the Lord. And they pitched over against the other 7 days. And it was that in the seventh day the battle was joined, and the children of Israel slew of the Syrians 100,000 footmen in one day. in one day. But the rest fled to Aphek into the city, and there was a wall, and there a wall fell upon 27,000 of men that were left. And Ben-Hadad fled and came into the city into an inner chamber. And his servant said unto him, Behold, now we have heard that the king of the house of Israel are merciful kings. Let us, the kings of the house of Israel, are merciful kings. Let us, I pray thee, put sackcloth on our loins and ropes upon our heads and go out to the king of Israel. Peradventure, he will save thy life. Okay, so we have an answer for one. Now, Charles, actually, you know what? Let me give Thomas. Remember, we were reading last time. Did we have an answer for why God was letting them win that war before? Even though Ahab was evil? Don't forget to unmute, Thomas.
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yeah. When we were reading yesterday, we didn't have a reason for why God was letting Ahab win that war, even though he was a wicked king. We had possibilities, but we didn't know why, right?
I wasn't on yesterday.
Oh, my bad. Chris, you were on for that, right? I know you read. I don't know if you're able to unmute. Let me see. Nope, that's fine. All right. So yesterday when we were reading, we read about the war with Ahab when they beat Ben-Hadad, and we talked about it a little bit, how they had defeated them, but Ahab was a wicked king. It said he was one of the ones that it said he did worse than the people before him. So how could God let them win? Because as we see from here, we see that God let them win here again to prove himself that he is God, which he doesn't need to do. How many times, Charles, since you've been reading with me, have we heard God say and do things to prove that he's the one true God?
Many. Too many to count.
Too many to count. He saved them from Egypt. He performed these 10 plagues. He did so much to prove who he is. He don't need to do this, but he still does it. He still proves himself time and time again. And so we finally have the answer as to why God is letting them win. Because he's proving himself again that he is the one true God. So in 27, as we see, the children were numbered. Now, when we see this here, Charles, is this the same type of number that you read in your portion?
No.
Exactly. But you see how it's different how it reads here. Number thee an army like the one you lost, versus here, and the children of Israel were numbered. So they were all head count, they were all there. And we know that because of the next section where it says, and were all present. They were numbered and they were all present. That's a different wording than the one that what you read. So then as we go through here, he's explaining how they went about it. So they went against them, and the children of Israel, they pitched or they set up camp around the Syrians like a flock of sheep, of baby kids, or kids, which is baby sheep and baby goats. But anyways, but the Syrians, even though they had this flock that was together, the children of Israel, the Syrians were filling out the whole country, which is a crazy amount of people. Imagine all of Vegas, size comparison, all of Vegas filled out with one nation, and then you have only the MGM Grand filled with the children of Israel, and there is no buildings, it's just the ground, just that size difference. That's pretty much the imagery that we're getting right here. So then, notice it didn't say a prophet, but it did say, then came a man of God and spoke to Ahab. And when he told him, he said, look, because the Syrians tried to claim that God was just the God of the hills and that he's not the God of the valleys, because of that, he's going to deliver them into your hand. You're going to win in this war, even though you got only 7,000 people and they got enough to fill out a country. So so that's where we get the understanding and the proof of why God's allowing them to win. He's proving himself again, unnecessarily, but he's doing it. But then as they do it, so they go into this war, and at the end, it was 7 days they sat there. Again, we see 7 used in a time where it's showing a time of perfection or divinity. And here we see God's involvement. So at the end of 7 days, they actually went into the battle. And the Syrians lost 100,000 people in one day, which is crazy. That is wild. That is outlandish. 7,000 people slaughtered 100,000 people. Goes to show the difference between when God's on your side or not. Then as we continued in, the ones that didn't get slaughtered, they all fled back to the city of Aphek. And over at the city of Aphek, and it says, and there a wall fell upon 27,000 of the men that were left. Now, that wall in the city, that could be a literal physical wall, or it could possibly mean that there was a wall of Israelites. That could go either way. But regardless of it, remember, there was only 7,000 Israelites. Whether it's a physical wall that fell upon them, or it's literally the children of Israel that are left, because they're not all over there, so it's less than 7,000. They killed 20,000. No, 27,000 there. So now we have 127,000 that have died of the Syrians. And then Ben-Hadad, he left, he fled, and he left and came into the city, into an inner chamber. So now he's not just in the building, he's in the inner chamber of a building. And his servants are sitting there trying to tell him, like, look, we have heard, we know already, it's so well known, everybody knows this. The kings of Israel are extremely merciful kings. If we just plead for our life, put ourselves in a loincloth. If you want to know what a loincloth is, think about Tarzan when he's in the forest. Only covers the manhood area. That's it. If we put ourselves in a loincloth and we put a rope about our neck like a dog leash, but it's a rope about our neck, they might not kill us. That might give us a chance to survive. You might be able to walk away with your life if you do that. So now, all that big talk that Ben-Hadad was doing, and now he's willing to strip himself to basically naked, debase himself, dishonor. So many levels of derogatoriness. Actually, I don't think that's a word, but I'm using it. A derogatoriness. And with that being said, this is the thought that they're coming to. But it all started with him being a big talker. And this goes to show something that's true that has maintained to today about how people don't change. This is a good lesson to take into account. 9 times out of 10, now there are exceptions for the ones that talk, but 9 times out of 10, the way that people work is the ones that bark the loudest stay back on the porch the most. Those who talk don't do, and those who do don't talk. They let their actions speak for them. That's the normal. So even though there are exceptions every once in a great while, That's how it normally is. And we all know how that is. That's how it is for the most part today. But as we see in the Bible in Ecclesiastes, and I quote it every time, there is nothing new under the sun. Everything's just on repeat, like a track that's got scratched. All right. Any comments or questions as we switch to the final section? All right. Then go ahead, Charles, when you're ready for the final section.
All right, so I'll be reading First Kings chapter 20, verses 32 to 34. Switch over to the app. Give it a couple seconds. Verse 32. So they girded sackcloth on their loins and put ropes on their heads and came to the king of Israel and said, Thy servant Benhadad said, or saith, I pray thee, let me live. And he said, Is he yet alive? He is my brother. Now the men did diligently observe whether anything would come from him, and did hastily catch it. And they said, Thy brother Benhadad. Then he said, Go ye, bring him. Then Benhadad came forth to him, and he caused him to come up into the chariot. And Benhadad said unto him, The cities which my father took from thy father.
No. Redo that. That's remember what. Take into account, he put himself in sackcloth. He's pleading right now for his safety, as he already read. Reread that.
Verse 34. And Benhadad said unto him, The cities which my father took from thy father, I will restore, and thou shalt make streets for thee in Damascus, as my father made in Samaria. Then said Ahab, I will send thee away with this covenant. So he made a covenant with him and sent him away.
That was perfect, Charles. Great job on the reread. Keep that in mind next time you go to read something like that. Think about the situation. When you read that the first time, that was way off. The second time you read it was literally perfect. No mistakes. You got the whole right emotion, everything. Good job on the second one.
Got it. So verse 32, as what you said about putting the cloth, like the Tarzan, the cloth in the regions, private regions, and putting those ropes on their heads, which I don't know why I'm thinking about nooses in my head. I don't know why I can't get it out of my head now. But putting ropes
It's the
on their
same
head.
thing. A dog leash is a noose on a dog. We just don't think about it like that because it's not with the same type of material.
Mm-hmm. So the servants are doing that and coming to the king of Israel, Ahab, and telling them that Ben-Hadad had said, Yeah, I'm begging, I'm pleading you, let me live. Now, and he said, now I'm taking that as Ahab responding, saying, Is he yet alive? He's still alive?
Yeah.
He is my brother. Now that's what it only threw me off because of the part of he is my brother part, which that's still Ahab talking, saying he is my brother. Next in verse 33.
Well, keep in mind, is that literal or metaphorical?
Metaphorical. That's definitely metaphorical. Now verse 33. Now the men did diligently observe whether anything would come from him, and did hastily catch it. Now the men, as in children of Israel, observe.
Mm-hmm.
And they're the ones observing and everything because they're the winners. And they see that, hey, there's your brother Hadad, metaphorical brother Hadad. Then Ahab says, Bring Ben-Hadad to me. He comes up in the chariot. Then Ben-Hadad tells Ahab, like begging and pleading, about bring the cities which Ben-Hadad's father, took from Ahab's dad. He's gonna bring them. He's gonna restore them, as in bring them back to Ahab. and he's begging and pleading for Ahab to make streets in a place of Damascus, as Ben-Hadad's father had did for Samaria. Next, Ahab, tells him to, he makes a covenant with him that he's going to do that, but he sends him off on his way. And
Don't forget
we
to
read
explain what a covenant is.
like an oath. He made an oath or promise.
Agreement.
But agreement between Ahab and Ben-Hadad.
What's the difference between an oath or promise and an agreement?
With the oath, we talked about how you're accountable for that.
You're accountable on all three.
I'm trying to think. Oath, agreement, promise. I kind of put them in the same little bubble. I gotta get specific though. At the moment, I can't think of the differences. I'm still thinking about it.
All right. An oath is something you make to someone, but it's not necessarily two-sided. I can make an oath to you, Charles, without any reciprocation from you to me. Charles, this is an oath that I will never sleep with any of your sisters. For everybody's sake, he doesn't have any sisters, is just one example. I will never sleep with any of your sisters. If you slept with mine, can I be mad? Do I really have the right to be mad?
Well, no, because I didn't make one with you. You made one with me.
Exactly.
And then then you brought that up. Okay, so the agreement is two parties are agreeing to the same thing. That's where you were going with it. Okay, then that's the specific. So oath is
it's the same problem with a promise. A promise doesn't have to go two-sided. An oath and a promise are both one-sided statements. Now, because you said Ahab made an oath to him, but if you would have said they made an oath together, that would have been including the two sides. But the way you phrased it only had one side. But if you said that he made an agreement with him, now you have that two sides regardless.
Because that's what this came to, is those two agreeing to the terms.
Exactly. It's not a one-sided deal. It's a two-sided.
And after that, with the Ahab and Ben-Hadad agreeing to those terms, he sent Ben-Hadad on his way. Separate from what we've read, what we just read just now, we read a king of the children of Israel doing the same thing to his enemy, letting the king of that enemy live. So there's a strong possibility we're going to read what happens to the king of Israel for doing that.
Yeah, possibility it bites him in the butt.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, one last question, and this will go to other people if you can't figure it out. We know that he was being we said that he was being metaphorical, calling him his brother. Is that actually the only other option besides literal?
Well, I mean, literal and metaphorical are only two options I can think. Is there anything other than the two?
There is. All right, Thomas, I'll give you the chance. Go ahead and unmute if you can.
Yeah.
There's a third option that we didn't take into account.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
All right. Now then, Chris, I don't know if you're able to unmute. Let me look and see if he even said that. If he's just listening. Kivana's just listening. Thomas can answer. Chris said he could answer. All right, Chris, you said you're able to answer. Are you going to unmute? I'll give you 10 seconds. Must be some problem with the phone. If not, you got to pay more attention. You got to be able to answer whatever when the time comes. All right, go ahead, Charles. But if it is a problem with the phone, Chris, that's fine. Message me on Facebook after to let me know if it was a problem with the phone. All right, go ahead, Charles.
when you're talking about that third option, I'm thinking about the how do I re-explain this? Brothers in arms is what they talk about in the military. You're not my brother. You're just my brother in this moment of a warrior. Like we're the warriors, we're the soldiers, and we're brothers
Yeah,
in that sense. But once we leave the military, that's it. we're only brothers in the sense
not
of
true though.
our duty.
Actually, not true. There are times where
Mm,
people who were soldiers who even fought against each other, they call them brothers in war, brothers in arms. They were enemies, but they became friends after the fact because both of them disagreed with the war or whatever reason they had where they both weren't, they were only enemies because they were doing their job, not because they actually had something against each other.
so you,
This
yeah,
had,
that's so, yeah, yeah, that you got it, you got it. Because I thought when you meant that third part that yeah, brothers in arms, but not brothers like to get like with this situation with Ben Hadad going his way, Ahab going his way. But no, okay, you're talking about the brothers in arms where they agree with each other and they're soldiers and they're doing their job, but that's
exactly,
enemies in war, but out of war. When you take away the war, they can actually get along and and agree to
exactly.
certain things.
Now, here's why that third part matters. Here, when he says he is my brother, when he means brother in war, if he means like that, it's not a metaphor. He's talking about they fought in this war together, but they didn't have something against each other personally. That's what he could be meaning. But the reason why that matters is if he is my brother in war and enemies like that, that would normally happen among soldiers. So what it seems like here, because they're not literally brothers, they're not brothers in arms because they don't get along with each other. He's literally trying to plead. It's an excuse, is the third reason or the third thing. It's not being used as a metaphor at all in this situation. It's actually being used as an excuse. He's still alive. Okay, you know what? Don't worry about it. He's my brother. We'll let him go. We're both human beings. If he's willing to submit like that, then let him go. We'll be his brothers. It can be a future example of what his goal or hope is. Much like if you have somebody in your life that you've been training up or trying to work and he's not where he needs to be, but you're wanting to work with him, you're wanting to help him get there, you could say he's a son to me. Even if at the time he's not actually a son to you at all. So what you're saying is not a metaphor and it's not literal, but it's more so a tool to explain the hope that you have of where it leads. You see what I'm saying, Charles?
I see what you're saying.
So in saying he is my brother, it's more of putting out words as like a hope or walking by faith of where he wants the future to go between them, that they no longer be enemies but become as brothers. All right. Now then, any comments or questions before we finish it out? All right, then Charles, why don't you go ahead and pray us out?
All right, everybody, go ahead and bow your heads. Father, thank you for showing us the defeat of Ben Hadad and showing us another great example of with you in the children of Israel lives, as long as with you in our lives, what can be accomplished and what can get done, and how we can overcome great, great trials and tribulations and conflicts. And thank you for also giving me some good practice on some of the context, getting to try to get the context better. I pray that with what we got today, that we can jot it in our notes and that we can take it into making sure that we're always keeping in mind what you can do for us and how you can help us through our complications, trials, and tribulations. And yeah, that's it. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. All right, good job today, Charles. A lot to work on, but that was good. And everybody, thanks for being on, and I'll see you guys on Sunday. If not for talking to you guys later today or tomorrow. Bye, y'all.